Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Barbell Life podcast. Thank you. Just want to give a big shout out to our primary sponsor and the one that's bringing this to you guys, Dynamic Fitness and Strength. You guys provide us with the best equipment on planet Earth. Our athletes are savages, but yet your equipment holds up to these crazy dudes. So, and women, sorry. Thank you so much for everything you do. Shout out to Gym Aware and also Flex by Gym Aware and all that you do for us. Yeah, we could not do what we do, nor could I test my athletes the way I do, nor could I put them through what I do without Dynamic Fitness and Strength and Gymwear. So I appreciate you both. And without further ado, let's get to the show. Today we're going to talk about the complexity of the body. And so hopefully any of you guys out there who like to talk about absolutes can learn why that's a silly thing to do. All right. All right, guys. Today we're going to talk about the complexities of the human body. Um, this is my way of showing people why absolutes are absolutely awful. And so this is going to help you understand why it gets me so bent out of shape. The new era of strength and conditioning. So there's testing. This is definitely me being very happy that this is where we're moving. You've got testing to understand one's physiology. You got blood, urine, feces, hair, saliva. My guys, Barbell Shrug, Andy Galpin, Dan Garner, they are really helping some amazing people by getting down to the nitty gritty of physiology and understanding what's going on within somebody. I'm going to show you soon just why this is needed. You got the macronutrients determine what you look like. This is straight from Dan Garner. Micronutrients determine how you feel and perform. So, and both determine if you live. And if you look over here, you'll see, let me get my little pointer. Let's see, laser pointer. All right. You'll see that, this is the neuromuscular junction. This is acetylcholine. You got sodium and potassium channels. You even get, there'll be some calcium running up and down as an action potential. This is a diagram. I got this one from Dr. Cook. I think both of these I got from Dr. Cook, my exercise physiology professor in my master's that I'm finished up with now. But as you see with mTOR, that's like the number one hypertrophy mechanism now. And you see all the things that goes on. And you'll see amino acid transporters, leucine, sodium, potassium. Once again, these things don't happen without certain without certain micronutrients. So you have to understand what the body needs and how it uses it to understand the importance and significance of all the macronutrients. Structural organization of the human body. You got the chemical elements, aka the atoms known to exist on the earth, and it's the smallest amount of matter. You get calcium, sodium, potassium, phosphorus. You got molecules, which is a combination of any of those, which is H2O, water, carbon dioxide. That's the very common. Over here is another example of an action potential of what happens when we move. This is exactly what goes down. We get depolarization, calcium and potassium moving in and out. So, yeah, this is just to show you these things can't happen unless you understand the chemicals within the body. If you have the right amount of micronutrients, sorry. Then you have the cellular level. Cells are made of many different molecules. The smallest independent living thing in the human body. Many different types. There's muscle fibers. Cells contract to move. You've got red blood cells, which carry oxygen. You got the nerve cells, which the neurons, which you'll learn more about in a little bit, or I've kind of mentioned already. You go back one. That's the neuron, the axon, the alpha neuron. And so then there's the organelles. I'm just hoping you guys understand the complexity of the body. So then each cell, and they're all different, they're all going to have some of these, some will not have as many or as much or any of it. But you got the mitochondria, which we know is the powerhouse of the cell, the nucleus, where you get all the genetic information. The ribosomes, where the complex proteins are assembled by the from RNA. You got vesicles, which are packages of cell membranes that contain materials for transfer in and out of the cell. Endoplasmic reticulum. There's also endoplasmic reticulum is also subdivided into smooth and rough endoplasmic reticulum, and it synthesizes cellular materials. The Golgi apparatus packages proteins into membrane-bound vesicles for excretion from cell. The cytoskeleton, the vacuole, the lysosomes, and then the centrioles, which that's what helps with cell division. That gets really complicated. Here's an example of a cell and all the different organelles. So you see, my point is that you have to understand, the cell, but then you have to understand the little organelles within the cells. And because it might be a problem at the nucleus, if you're having genetic issues, you're going to want to look at the nucleus probably. So, or, if you're having, issues for your body actually translating the DNA into what it was intended to with the mRNA, then you might want to look at ribosomes. So, then you got the tissue level, you got muscle tissue, nervous tissue, epithelial tissue, connective tissue. So the muscle tissue is comprised of muscle fibers. Let me move my little screen here. All right. So, and for example, it's got many nuclei for movement. It needs that because it's got to happen quickly too. The nervous tissue comprises neurons and cells of the brain and used for signal transport. And you got, they're going to be in the brain and throughout the spinal cord as well. So some of them are going to be myelinated because they're going to be fast. So they're going to be covered by a particular substance that's going to help the speed of that transmission. You got epithelial tissue, which they bind together to keep some things out, like skin, or you got the stomach lining. You don't even get an out or in. So then you got connective tissue, which is structural strength. You think about tendons and ligaments, and they defend against invaders. Then you got the organ, which is two or more of these tissues form an organ. And then you got the organ systems, which is nervous, muscular, cardiovascular, respiratory, endocrine, urinary, digestive, skeletal, reproductive, and lymphatic. And the thing is you got to not only understand each of them, you got to understand how they work together. Does the nervous system run things, or does endocrine? It just depends. Is going to be the answer. If you don't understand how the cardiovascular and respiratory systems work together, then you're in big trouble. So it takes a very complex view of the body to really understand it. So if there's any coaches out there who really feel that they know enough, I hope I'm telling you that you don't, because I don't. I'm not even close. Sorry. I think I got all right. There we go. Sorry, getting back on track. Other things you need to consider when you're thinking about the body and causes, whether it's injuries, performance. You've got biomechanics. When you think about biomechanics, you got to talk about the internal moments, which is you look at each joint and the ligaments and tendons that cross that joint, and as opposed to external moments. So if you're lifting, a big heavy barbell, you need to know the difference in the external, which is that the gravity causing that downward motion on that mass versus your joints countering that. So you got ligament and tendon attachments, which we've already gone over, but so understanding the biomechanics and just natural movement. How does one move? So then you got biological age and training age. There's going to be a lot of differences with biological age. A 7-year-old obviously is not going to be doing the same thing as a 12-year-old, and a 12-year-old not the same thing as an 18-year-old. Then you also need to look at training age. Somebody can be 18 years old, but they've been doing weightlifting, for example, for 6 years. You can't treat them the same as someone who's been doing it for 2, who's 21. You got genetics, differences in sex, at birth. You got metabolism, energy systems. Man, the energy system gets really complicated because if you look at it as like the phosphocreatine system, then glycolysis, then you got carbohydrate oxidation, fat oxidation. You can't look at them as separate. You got to look at how they work together. Once again, it's a puzzle. It's not like an either or type thing. You got to understand the planes of motion. You got the transverse plane, the frontal plane, the sagittal frontals. Think about things moving side to side, sagittal forwards and backwards, transverse, rotational. Then you got fiber types. Andy Galpin has taught a lot of us about fiber types. You got type 1, type 2A, type 2X, and then there's a hybrids of all of that. So then you got muscle fibers, arrangements of sarcomeres. Meaning, are they side by side or are they long? The pennation angle of sarcomeres. That's also something to consider. Like if you have a greater angle of a, say, a muscle fiber, it's going to be stronger but slower. When they're aligned, I'm talking about arrangement, that is. Think about when sarcomeres are in series or long ways instead of side by side. They're long ways, then it's going to be very fast, but it's not going to be very strong. If they're arranged side by side, they're going to be very strong, but not as fast. The angle, the same way. The steeper the angle, the quicker it's going to be. The greater the angle, stronger but slower. Then you got to look at motor unit recruitment. How many fibers are you recruiting? So for every that talked about the alpha motor neurons, you think about it and what every muscle that it innervates. As soon as it once you activate it, it activates them all. However, the number of motor units you recruit, that's what we're after. The better you get and the longer you do a certain movement, the more of those you recruit, and the faster. I'm talking about the rate of motor unit recruitment. The length tension relationship, which we're going to go over in a little bit. You think about the elastic components, which is, let me move this, sorry. Elastic components, tighten, the tendons, the stress shortening cycle. And also with the stress shortening cycle, you got the Golgi tendon organ inhibition versus like the muscle spindle contractility. As you get better at something with the stress shortening cycle, the GTO, the Golgi tendon organ, normally what it does, it's located within the tendon. When it feels that tendon, getting a lot of tension on it, it shuts the muscle down so you don't tear that tendon. Whereas the muscle spindle, when it feels the stretch in the muscle, it helps with contract, it helps you contract. And so, and the faster and the more stretch you give it, the more contractility you're going to get from the muscle spindle. So then you got the most motor unit synchronization. A lot of this, by the way, is coming from, if you go to Andy Galpin, you look at how to get strong without gaining weight. A lot of the stuff comes straight from that video. But the motor unit synchronization, like meaning that you recruit the proper fibers. You want to be doing it in a very coordinated effort. The agonist antagonist relationship for you sprinters out there, how important is that? Because as one muscle is working, say when the hamstring is pulling, you want the quadricep to be turned off, and you went on, off, on, off. And so if that relationship is not there, you're not going to be as fast as you could. So this will when I talked about the length tension relationship. This is from Dr. Cook and my exercise phys class. So let me see if I can explain that. As the muscle is contracted. So you see it's contracted. You got the myosin and the actin. When they're put up against each other, it can't, it cannot give any more isometric tetanus contraction. However, as it moves apart, then it can. And then B, it's like when it's optimized. And then C, it's starting to get too far, and then D, it's too far. Now you're lengthening it so far that the myosin can't reach the actin. In A, right here, you got the actin and the myosin bumping up against each other, so it can't go any further. So by looking at that, you would think, okay, then I want to spend most of my time, not all the way contracted, not all the way lengthened, but not necessarily true, because shout out Andy, as you see the picture right there. You think about total tension. Reality is that yes, this is the muscle tension curve that we just talked about. But the elastic tension, the things that comes with like there's when I think about elastic tension, I'm talking about the stretch shortening cycle. You're also going to talk about the elastic qualities in the muscle. Think about tighten, who's responsible for that really. And that by elastic, you're talking about the tension and the when your foot hits the ground, is it tight and it slings you forward, or is it weak and it kind of you lose energy out the back? You can also think about like the tendons, the the ligaments. Sorry, totally blanked out. This is a lot for one podcast, but you think about the tendons, you think about the ligaments, the elasticity that one possesses, like meaning, like when your foot strikes the ground, does it propel you forward instantly, or do you lose because it's weak? You got your Achilles. Is your Achilles tendon thick and tight, or is it kind of weak? But anyway, when you think about all the elastic components, stretch shortening cycle, tighten the elasticity qualities within the muscle itself. So the more of a stretch that you give a muscle, the more of this elastic component you get. So even though you're stretching too far here, the elastic component, the elastic tension that you're getting improves. So therefore it goes up. It's the total tension, this dotted line increases. So even though it's not necessarily where elastic tension is the highest, and it's not necessarily where the contractile tension is the highest, it's when these two come together that you get your best total tension and therefore force reduction. So I hope that made sense. Andy explains it better than I do. So with all that said, with all the complexity of the body that we've talked about, you got to think about like, how do I individualize things? Instead of saying like, what really got me to want to do this podcast is because online all the time you'll hear people talking, they'll pick one thing, that's all they think about, and they feel everything is related to that. Say movement. I like movement too. Biomechanics, that's my favorite. But it is not the end all. It doesn't answer all questions. It doesn't cure cancer. That's for darn sure. But like until you get a better understanding of how the body works holistically together, then it's going to be really tough for you to be the best coach or teacher that you can be. So some testing that I would recommend: you look at the force velocity curve with gym wear. That's going to look at someone's ability to be fast. If you look at a force velocity curve, most people are going to fall in the spectrum of either fast and weak, strong and slow, or somewhere in the middle, which is where we want to be and create the most power, because power equals force times velocity. So you're going to look at where your athletes fall in this curve. So then, like if they're fast and weak, I need to get them strong. If they're strong but slow, we need to work on speed. So it just helps me know the individual. You can look at force plates, look at dynamic strength index. You can look at asymmetries, ground contact time, the reactive strength index, which is one of my favorites, and you can use your gym wear or jump mat to measure that. But simply RSI score is a look at doing a depth jump. And what we do is we use a 45 centimeter height and we jump off of it, and you're looking at ground contact time and you're going to add height. So you take the height divided by ground contact time and you get an RSI score. It's a great way to look at elasticity too, because the ground contact time is going to look at your elastic qualities. So if you have really good ones, it'll be a short ground contact time. And that's good for sprinters, weightlifters, or anybody who really needs elastic components. Even if I was a long distance runner, elasticity is going to be super important because it's going to tell you the efficiency of your run. So if I'm say I'm a cross country runner, so I'm running like 5Ks. And so every time my foot hits the ground, if I have good elastic qualities, it's going to propel me forwards. I'm not going to lose energy. Otherwise, I'm going to lose energy. And so each step is not going to propel me forwards as much as it would someone else. Video analysis is a great way to detect motion in all planes. If you're a pitcher or a baseball hitter, or you throwing a punch, getting one of those really good video analysis, there's like 8 camera systems. You can really see like where you need work, and where you're doing really well. You also, it's those things are so good because there's so many cameras. They can get all the information. They can tell you the velocity in all the different areas throughout a movement. So those are great. A dynamometer is going to do strength assessments. You can look at individual muscles and see where you have a weakness. Inclinometer is going to show you the range of motion. VO2 max and lactate threshold. So these are going to be great ways to see, like, if you're like a boxer or you're an MMA fighter, or if you're, CrossFit athlete. It's good to know these two because the VO2 max is going to be your ability to get and use the most oxygen. You'll find out your maximum ability. Lactate threshold, basically, you're going to find out at what point does your body have to go has to leave anaerobic and go into aerobic, and so you'll see at what speed are you going to blow up at. Therefore, you'll want to stay right below that speed to do things for a long duration. That makes sense, because like what happens is that you're using lactate to grab on to hydrogen and clear out that hydrogen that's forming during while you're doing the anaerobic process. So like as long as you can clear that out and the hydrogen doesn't become overwhelming, then you can do that for quite a while. However, when you start going all out, eventually the lactate threshold, you reach it, and then boom, you're skyrocketed. An easy way to tell is this is like get on a bike or a treadmill and and slowly increase the speed. And then when you get to a certain speed that you can't no longer talk comfortably, that's a pretty close measurement of a lactate threshold. So anyway, so sleep studies, they monitoring the body and the environment. I know Andy's talked a lot about that. And then heart rate variability, that's your body's ability to really handle stress. It's going to be a look at like your parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system. And it's important to people for longevity as well, because a good heart rate variability, meaning like it's going to vary, from beat to beat, the length between the beats is going to vary, and that is really good for a look at longevity of life. So then you see over here's some of the tests that we do when we're going to talk to our athletes. This is range of motion. We're going to look at muscle mass, body fat percentage, total weight. We look at RSI, DSI. We look at force velocity curves of all these movements. And then we look at each of those on a T-score. So it's a look at like each individual athlete as compares to the average of the team. So that line is like the team's average. And so seeing where you stack up. I had to put this, I couldn't help it. But like, so here's my man, Dan Garner. And then obviously we all know this guy, the great fighter O'Malley. So they're hanging out. But if you guys want to get to the point of where you're working with guys like that, and him and Andy Galpin both, like they work with all the best because they can break the body down into, and find out exactly what system, what micronutrient you're missing, like every single flaw you might possibly have. And they're going to show you how to optimize everything. Your training, your recovery, your sleep. So here's that episode of Barbell Shrug where the best gut health cleanse, are naps killing your sleep, parasites in your gut, new research of the nervous system, and improving recovery using hyperbaric chambers. So shout out Barbell Shrug, by the way. And shout out both. I've learned so much in the last year from Dan and from Andy, of course. We're getting there, y'all. So to truly help people, a firm understanding of physiology is needed. Example, gut health. So this is like, you look at what's going on. This is, I think I took this right from either Andy or Dan, where I looked at NSAIDs and what it does to the gut. And look what you have to understand. Instead of just saying, NSAIDs does X, you need to learn why, like what's going on in there, what's permeable, what's not, like the TLR4. And I'm not going to try to pretend that I do, but I will say this. The key is you don't have to know like physiology as good as Dan. Whereas Dan can't teach weightlifting as good as me. But if I understand the complexity, then I know where to go look or to ask him, and not to assume that I know the answer to everything and it's going to lie on just the spectrum of knowledge that I might have. So anyway, what does lipopolysaccharide mediated inflammation have a role in OA? Like, holy cow. But anyway, the point being in osteoarthritis, the point being the body is complex. It's kind of going to be the common theme here. Now, this is straight from Andy. I guess this is me just like actually making him look so good, huh? But I'm hoping that it gives you guys an understanding of the complexity of the body. But these are all from his YouTube videos. It's just showing the nerves and the muscles and the blood and the liver and the heart and the lungs. All it has to do when it comes to like endurance training, like it all has to work together. And if you know that the nerves, these carbs, you got the sodium and potassium pump, you've got the pH levels, the muscle has the phosphocreatine, glycogen, fat, metabolic speed, also pH balance. You look at blood, you got glucose, fat, oxygen, carbon dioxide, lactate, hydrogen out, needs to go out. Capillary density, which is super important in blood distribution. The liver sends glucose to the muscles. Anyway, if you understand that, then you can say down here, all these macros and micronutrients, then you can understand, if you understand the complexity of all the systems in the body at all the way down to the cellular level, then it's easy to understand why and how much of each that we need and what each does, because you know what each of these is important for, because you know the physiology of the body. So if that makes sense, you look at pyruvates, carbohydrates, you understand the electron transport chain and the Krebs cycle. So I'm going to make my point very soon on all this. So think I'm kind of, but I'm going to bring it all together soon. Now, the reason this all started is there was a couple things that happened last week, and someone was talking about ACL injuries and why they think that this person thought the ACL injury, that weightlifting or squatting, if people do any types of valgus at all, that's going to teach this person a pattern that's going to cause an ACL injury, which is, if the ACLs was only valgus that caused them, then they might have a point, but they got to understand the structure and the body as a whole. There's a lot of things that has to happen. But you have to understand, what does it look like, at the very cellular level, especially at least at the tissue level, to understand, is that really what causes it? Now, the answer is no, not by itself, no. And if you understand weightlifting, people don't express valgus until it's at a maximal level. If you looked at, if you watch a weightlifter, you look at Kate Vibrant, you see her do a jump, you will see zero knee valgus when she lands. So they're very strong. There's, getting to this, this is actually what happens. You got to have hips are going to have adduction and internal rotation. The knee is definitely going to get some valgus, but when it's extended, when it's less flexed. It's when someone plants their foot in the ground, and then you have issues going on at the foot and ankle, really what happens. You're going to get internal or external. Normally, you get the external rotation of the tibia, and then, you're going to get the tibia is also going to slide forwards because the hamstrings are weaker than the quads. And then, the foot is out of control, unbalanced, all these things happen. So when you're squatting and have valgus, none of these other things, this is not happening, nor is this. It's just valgus, which a lot of people would assume that weightlifters might do that as a simple way to get a second stretch reflex from probably the abductor magnus. So adductor magnus, sorry. But it definitely has nothing to do with weak glute medius, which is a big predictor. I don't know if it's on here or not, but weak glute medius is a big predictor of a future ACL, non-contact ACL injury. But you got to understand there's a 5-factor model. There's going to be anthropometrics, There's going to be strength because a lot big indicator would be quad to ham ratio, the hamstrings being weaker than the quads. Anthropometrics, obviously, the longer your tibia is, the more at risk it is, just because of simple moment arms. Movement biomechanics, yes, and like if someone is moving correctly. So if you're going to make a cut, if you teach someone to make sure that you're getting lower because you know it's less of a get your base lower to the ground, makes it easier to overcome that gravity. So if you teach them to get down, make sure that the torso is going in the opposite direction. Another thing that happens right here is that the torso is getting pulled this way, so that now big time gravity is not in your favor, and nor is the inertia, because now you've lengthened the moment of inertia right there when it's in relation to the foot and the anyway, the moment of inertia, the length from the foot is higher. If I squat down, get the body going this way, less tension, and less, especially if the body's going that way, that's causing that torsion, that circular. That is the motion that causes the most injuries. It's not necessarily compression, like having a heavy barbell on your back. It's the torsion. The knee is not supposed to rotate. It's supposed to flex and extend. It's not supposed to rotate. So proprioception and understand balance, and then the psychological, like just understanding that understanding that how to move, not being afraid. There's a lot of factors we're going to learn in a minute. It's going to show you just like how a person's psychological approach to life and sport can really cause some physiological changes. Complexity of the tendon. Oh, by the way, I don't know that Dr. Tim Hewett, he's going to be on my podcast this week, so I can't wait. It'll probably come out a week after this one, but I'm super excited. This is the guy who's done a lot of the research on the ACLs. Tendons. This is my man Keith Baar. He's been on the podcast already. You should go back and watch that. But once again, you got to understand the physiology of a tendon. Then you can look at like the mechanism of it, the injury mechanism. You can see this is basically just like anything, like a mechanical look at strain and stress. Yeah, just like I would if I was trying to bend a piece of like metal until it breaks for a building. But so you're going to look at like at what point stress causes the strain, and at what amount does it cause it to actually break. Here it's causing some microscopic failures and some small tears, and at this point it actually breaks. So understanding that is going to be key. Still, this is the physiology, but then with Keith Baar, if you go back and listen, he can talk to you about high velocity, how to maximize speed, but also prevent injuries. Because like here's a great point. If you guys got from this, like, oh, if I get the tendons, tighter and thicker, then I'm going to be faster and jump higher. You are, but then the further you go to that end of the spectrum, the more at risk of injury you're going to get, because you got to look at like it's the relationship of the tendon where it meets the muscle. If the tendon where it meets the muscle is way stronger than the actual muscle, then the muscle is going to tear. If the muscle, if the tendon is weak and the muscle gets strong, like some powerlifters, then the tendon is going to tear. So it's understanding that balance. Psychological impacts on the body. So psychology has physiological effects. So it's going to have increased muscle tension, increased fatigue, decreased ability to recover, decreased brain function, decreased ability to focus. This is just another way to think of the body as a whole. Other effects: inability to sleep, bad moods, decreased communication, bad moods, increased risk of injury, longer rehab periods. So here, what I would recommend for you guys is ongoing testing. If you're a coach, make sure that a subjective questionnaire is a great way to look at like what's going on outside of the gym, how it affects inside. Here, this is an example of some things that we look at on a daily basis, but find out outside stressors. This is a great way to look at sleep and nutrition, a snapshot view. You can look at the session RPE, meaning how hard this person thinks the session really is versus your intended. Like if you intended a session to be super easy, but someone down here is grading it like, a 10 that's super hard, then there's a problem. Either, this person can handle the volume you thought they could, or they're dealing with things outside the team. So it's a great way to keep an outlook on the person's psychosocial dealings outside of the gym. All right. Also, daily readiness, more testing, looking at person. Daily readiness is basically a look at like stress, either from accrued sessions and or stress outside the gym, because stress can be actually measured, because fatigue causes a decrease in the speed that one can produce, so decrease in velocity. That's why it's one of the first things that got me really excited about gym wear and velocity. But daily readiness, vertical jump or drop jump with gym wear or jump mat. So we use a drop jump, or we take a deficit. We look at 45 centimeters depth jump, and we look at ground contact time, and we look at height to give us the RSI score. So we look at a velocity profile, and we measure it ongoing, because it changes. Because just because someone has a perfect velocity profile now, like for example, Ryan, he gained a lot of weight, so things change. You got to see, what does that mean? Did he get slower, faster? At first it moved him closer to the. He's always been very dead in the middle, as you can see right here. A 34 inches with a 0.3 ground contact time. It was 113 RSI score. But like, if now that's changed, we need to work on elasticity more and speed, and we have, and now he's heavier and as good or better RSI score. You can also look at grip testing, a tap test. Shout out Andrew Huberman. I heard him talk about that when Andy Galpin was on his show. But it's a great look at upper motor neurons. So you can look at the CNS, especially the brain. Force velocity profile, I said, because it changes. Body fat, that's important, because like when body fat, or especially when weight goes up, there's going to be more tension now on the tendons and the ligaments. So really look at that and understand that when someone gains weight, you want to spend some quality time strengthening the ligaments, tendons, the connective tissue. So elasticity with RSI, that I already said that. Then we look at volume, average intensity, relative intensity, monotony and strain. The intensity number of lifts is just a fancy thing for relative intensity, and any performance factors important for your sport. So these are just important for the sport that we look at, and I'm going to look at any type of like increase or decrease that I wasn't expecting. All right, so that brings me to conclusion. So we've gone over the factors. We have anatomy, form and physiology, function, chemical. We have anatomy, which is the form of everything inside our bodies. Physiology is like the function of it. There's a chemical, cellular, tissue, organ system, organism, atoms, elements, molecules, organelles, neural, muscular, neuromuscular. You guys are getting it, right? There's psychological components. There's biomechanical components, energy systems, nutrition, macronutrients. Look, we've got to stop using absolutes. I think by now that, this whole, should someone lift in the gym, should they not? Go back real quick to this, should they? I don't know. Or how much should they? Matter of fact, when someone is super fast, they definitely should, to prevent injury. So like, you got to understand the body, not necessarily in the way that you get someone better at your particular sport. Good for you. If you're a track coach, that's awesome. But if you don't understand the other factors, then you're the reason why the athlete gets hurt too. So, if I'm coaching Usain Bolt back in his prime, I'm going to make sure that we peak his tendon, elasticity at the very last moment, so we can really get that thing, the tension super high, so he can make super fast. But knowing that that's when he's at super risk of injury. So don't isolate one factor as the normal answer. And and life is like the body. It's like there's black and white might exist, but only after a holistic approach to solving the problem do you actually understand and fix it. So, look at things as a whole. Stop saying, this is the way, like movement is the only way, psychology is the only way. It is, these are all aspects. The body is complicated. You probably don't know. So be on a quest. Let me leave you with this. I recommend any coach listening, I say you should be the coach that instead of like trying to prove to the world that you're the best coach and that no one is better than you, actually be more worried that that is true. Like, go increase your knowledge. Don't like belittle other people to make yourself feel better, to make you look better in front of your audience. Like, actually go out there and learn. I mean, like, I'm still learning. Like, I'm nowhere near like an Andy Galvin when it comes to physiology, nor Dan Garner, but my goal is to get there, is to get as close as I can, because only then, can I be as good a coach as I can possibly be. It helps me to make wise decisions in so many areas. And when you're training people like, with Ryan Grimsland, who, wants to medal in the Olympics, if you don't take a holistic approach, then you're going to fail. So anyway, I hope you guys learned something from this. I hope I can stop some of you from using absolutes because they're absolutely awful. Thanks. Oh, and just a shout out to Dynamic Fitness and Strength for sponsoring us and for giving the best equipment in the world. So thanks.